Others are owners of a St. John. Others are Tata, Jaja, Uganes. But beyond those hierarchies, we have the capacity that cannot be described, the language without codes, but with that's transformed into an identity, our identity in the spiritual field. We can feel it. You can feel it. You can transmit this. And this transmission has to do with the knowledge, our spirituality, and we are about to close. These are knowledges because they allow us to understand the world. They build the relations among ourselves. They identify the problems, health, death, illness, persecution, justice. It is a way to approach a philosophy of life. And here I want to vindicate my brother, Chucho Garcias. And he must be in Africa today when he talks about Afro epistemology. It is a knowledge that is built with aesthetics, with a sensitivity, with a code, with the logic. And all of us, we are bearers of this culture. We have inherited it. We need to be proud because this knowledge has the same historical weight as Western science and other knowledges, and has the same historical weight because it is there. There where you are seated, there is that knowledge. And we need to vindicate this knowledge. Each one of you, you are the bearer of this knowledge. Therefore, we need to respect our elderly people. The library, they are the libraries, they are a space, a room of knowledge they have conveyed, and our obligation, our duty, and this is urgent vis-a-vis these aggressions that we are going through. Our duty is to foster even further, to reproduce proudly, to defend this wisdom of our peoples, the wisdom, spiritual wisdom of this vast diversity of expressions of the Caribbean. And in this Caribbean, I include Mexico, Honduras, Panama, Nicaragua, Cuba. This pearl color that we find in the Antilles. We need to vindicate all this region. With that, I want to thank, on behalf of my colleagues, thank you for being here today, and thank you for bringing with you this dose of spirituality that you have with you. Thank you so much.
So let's continue beating those drums. What about the beatings of the drums? Thank you, Master. Oh, yes, there is. Thank you, Wariko. So, thank you, Master Diogenes, to expressing in words what we live in a reality in practice, which is a common language amongst all of us. Now we will give the floor to Sophia Lee, artist and cultural researcher from Barbados.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Sophia Lee. No need, no introduction. I am from the beautiful island of Barbados. have a question. My question is, what are some of the impacts of African spirituality on Caribbean society? Can anybody answer that question for me? What do you think would be some of the impacts? Any ideas? What are some of the impacts of African spirituality on Caribbean society? The room is too quiet. Today we're going to focus on African spirituality, punishment to the enslaved, forced migration, rebellion, and how the Caribbean has been impacted under the topic, the impact of African spirituality on Caribbean society from the 19th century to the 21st century. Slide number 2. Slide number 2. Slide number 2. You have to go all the way up. Thank you. Barbados, like other Caribbean islands, have been impacted by the colonial past with our many traditions and belief systems that are brought from across the Caribbean through the transatlantic slave trade, being suppressed and shaped by European value systems. This impacts the identity, the colonies, and the colonizers implemented change where it was convenient to them. This, however, never stopped the colonized from finding ways to practice their craft. Through some were broken from being punished, being raped, and stripped of privileges. If humans acknowledge that all men and women have been bestowed with the same potentials and shortcomings regardless of color, regardless of class, then our society would be further. It is through these circumstances and lack of education in our 21st century that we remain tainted by colonism. I bring to you this research of my experience of African spirituality. Unfortunately, African spirituality are not just viewed as a transfer of knowledge which occurs, but when skills are being applied in new ways, with new content in situations different from where they were acquired, according to Shunk. Next. A fundamental part of this research analyzes how Caribbean people are God-fearing people by nature. In those Christian denominations which permit dancing in church, worship, dances are mainly entitled liturgical, spiritual dances, and it incorporates the movement and form of worship that express but is not art or seen as entertainment. However, according to Chinua Achebe, the practical purpose of art is to channel the spiritual force into aesthetically satisfying physical form that captures the presumed attributes of that force. In this regard, voodoo has origins in West Africa, particularly in Nigeria and in Benin, where most Haitians' ancestors were born. Roman Catholicism and European colonizers in Africa and in French colonized the Western world in the 17th and the 18th century. Voodoo is spelt in many ways with fathomless deities, animal sacrifices, the spirit possession, which can be misunderstood across the globe as obey or seen as a cult. Similarly with candomblé, it is an African Brazilian religion which is based on worship of goddess and gods of nature. Candomblé is originally practiced by enslaved from Africa who were forced when they were shipped through the transatlantic slave trade. However, candomblé was banned in Brazil for a large part of the 20th century. It is like earthing an electrical charge to ensure communal safety according to Chinua Achebe. This way of worship is mentioned in sacred dances and is issued in devout ceremonies and rituals throughout history and prehistory. It is connection to the human body and fertility, which has caused it to be forbidden by some religions. And for example, we look at the encomienda system, which is the control of the church and forced labor. Next. On the other hand, African spirituality is the essence of Ifa, a system of divination based on the Yoruba divinity, where chants in this respect are given to the Iba, meaning reverence to God, more power, and also for quick manifestations of all praise that will be said by Olafemi. Omitutu represents potable water, which is given with respect to the priest and the priestess who enter the house of a shrine. And this is a process called libation. This action is viewed by some of our Caribbean community as obia. On the contrary, this same potable water, which is used for dedication and christening at the Anglican Church and Wesleyan churches in Barbados, and it is accepted by Christians as a blessing or holy water. It is interesting because that same water and immersion in the ocean is called baptism, where a member of the church is said to be, have a new life in Christ. But in contrast, Mother of Our Lives, Yemaya, or Yemoja, is the title given to the ocean in the Orisha faith, and the ocean is open to the universe to be fully immersed. Next. Mysteriously, according to Jerome Handler in 1650 to 1834, John Brathwaite revealed that in efforts to communicate with the British audience, early writers in Barbados indicated that witchcraft and sorcery produced the same kinds of symptoms on slaves as on those Europeans. Is that true? During the same time, Thomas Waldrick, an English army officer, reported the prevalence of sorcery or witchcraft on the island and noted that white men, overseers of plantations and masters have been forced to leave the island after being bewitched by the Negro. While in the case of the colonial parliament, Obey was highlighted in the Barbadian newspaper. It pointed out that a table listing of cases brought before the Grand Sessions, the court, on the Passing of and Consolidated Slave Act revealed that all those beatings and stuff would have been mass submissions, trials, and acquittals as a result of theft, and in some murder cases. For example, there was a case where that was taken to the extreme. An individual was convicted and sentenced to be transported to prison for life, but then was pardoned by the governor and restored by the owner. And these acts were dismissed under the case of Obia. And this happened around 1833 in Barbados. Next. With respect to African ontology, there are significant similarities within African and Caribbean practices, where rituals form a part of African spirituality in much the same way as they do in Christian practices. For example, at harvest in the Christian church, the first fruit in the form of vegetables and fruits are placed on the altar as an offering to God in thanksgiving for the provision of food. This is also practiced in the African traditions, where their variations of fruits and vegetables are offered to appease the deities in African rituals. However, this action is labeled as negative or unorthodox by some. According to my epistemological experience, what appears to be accepted is the conformity of specific doctrines and philosophies of denominations. Daniel Boaz, over a century, spoke about books and newspapers and media and various types of paraphernalia are being advertised and sold to the wider public on Santeria, human sacrifice, voodoo, and obeah. And also noted about the earthquake in Haiti in January 12, 2010, that it was God's retribution on Haitians for practicing voodoo and making a pact to the devil, Pat Robertson. Many persons view these acts as connected to enslavement, which continues to affect our current society. Next. Like other African spiritual belief systems, the origins of the spiritual Baptists can be traced back to the 18th and the 19th century in the Caribbean, particularly in Trinidad and Tobago, Grenada, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines. The spiritual Baptists have had their fair share of, colonialism, and out of that slave experience, they emerged their freedom, African retentions. The faith emerged because of the complex interplay of African spirituality, Christian influence, and the endurance of the legacy over the period of slavery. They were banned from wearing robes in 1951 and called the quarter suit, which connects to our African garments. The spiritual Baptist community is a body of people. From their spiritual lineage, they would have used the biblical figure, John the Baptist. According to Archbishop Elton Griffith et al., they put on the whole armor of God and guided their vest with truth and put on the breastplates of righteousness and shod their feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace and took the shield of faith. In this regard, they were able to quench the fiery darts of the wicked. The spiritual Baptists are now known as the Shouter Baptists, or Baptists. The apron hides the nakedness, like a metaphor in the Bible. Aprons for nurses and teachers and mothers are called, ceremonial aprons. They use this to cover, like how the story of Adam and Eve, depending on the office, they would have pockets or they wouldn't have pockets. Both men and women wear uniforms and accessories. They may come with a dream. The aprons are given with a dream, or a manifestation. It is not spiritual. It's not a spiritual garment, but it's a garment for the church. The spiritual Baptists were accused of practicing something other than Christianity. Next. Let's have a little video here on the first fruit of harvest. I can't hear anything. Can we have some volume? But we can see the movement, but there's no volume. Slide number 9. This is the anniversary of the pilgrimage at the Spiritual Baptist Church. It appears as though if we have to start playing some drums in here. Okay, so we can move on to slide number 10. Slide number 10. The Barbados Landship is the oldest serving Afro-Caribbean movement. Thank you. The Barbados Landship is the oldest serving Afro-Caribbean movement, which is still existing today. The Landship is known for its communal and social practices in entertainment, maneuvers, rituals through masquerade. And what I have done is to launch a ship, because this is the way we would be able to continue something like the drums of ALBA. So I've launched a ship in Barbados, and the name of that ship is called Queen Udine. I did a case study at the Ellerslie School. This is a secondary school in Barbados. And the title under this case study is Testing the Waters, Launching of a Landship, Queen Udine, a case study of an intangible cultural form. So the Queen Udine, ELSYs, will prompt several investigations. For example, it can be incorporated in schools as a curriculum for teaching Afro-Caribbean histories and spirituality. It can also be utilized to teach dance movements known as landship maneuvers, song and theater. It is also a health and wellness practice by eating, a healthier food, exercising frequently, while creating a healthier lifestyle. Landship studies also provide an opportunity to learn about financial literacy by teaching the ways of the susu, a landship savings practice found in the Caribbean and African cultures. Overall, the dock is open to students, staff, and the wider Black Rock community. At this time, because we couldn't hear the drums from the pilgrimage for the spiritual Baptist, and I'm asking for you to take your drums out and let's serenade for a little bit, and that would suffice for the pilgrim anniversary. So if you can take your drums out and let's have a session to replace the absence of the pilgrimage from the spiritual Baptist that we couldn't hear on the volume. Let's go, drums of ALBA. So let's start with a Shango rhythm. For those who are Trinidad is here, we can have some Shango, and that would assist with the spiritual Baptist content of what was missing. Is Trinidad here? Anybody from Trinidad?
Trinidad,
Anybody here can play Shango rhythms?
Trinidad puede tocar ritmos de Changó. ¿Dónde está Trinidad? ¿Está presente en la
Or
sala?
anyone from the Caribbean can play Shango, because that's the rhythm that was played.
Guárico, Vasallos del Zulia. A repique ese tambor, hermanos. Vamos primero, Guárico, vamos Guárico. Y después vamos con Vasallos. Ajá.
All right, so let's
Va,
get the rhythm
va,
going.
va. Bien.
From Wariko we go to the basals. And previously we had the drums from Falcon.
Okay, 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 okay.
Calm down, calm down now. It's okay.
Nice.
Estado Zulia, Zulia. This Occident.
Okay, 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 okay. That's the power of the drum. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. That is the power of the drum. Slide number 11. So I'm going to give you something to think about. How, how has the system of IFA affected us in the Caribbean? How can we establish a relationship with our African heritage, sustain our tradition, and aim to recognize preservation of African spirituality in our society? Why African spirituality? Because African spirituality better represents the Caribbean community as our descendants. African spirituality is vast, and Africans were forced to find ways to communicate. The several African spiritualities can serve as a stimulus for us in the Caribbean community. Couple of questions for you. What strategies can be considered for African spirituality and its survival in the Caribbean community? How can African spirituality inform the Caribbean community in the 21st century? And I think that what we're doing here is a perfect example of solving the issues of what is happening now in the Caribbean. There's a rise in culture. So on that note, I want to thank you very much for listening. Thank you. Slide number 12.
Gracias, profa. Sofía Lee, y vemos
Thank you,
que el
Professor
detalle de
Lee. And
audio
we
se
are
convirtió en la
seeing that the
posibilidad
detail
de
with
mostrar
the audio, the
que
issue with the
todos
audio was a
y todas
possibility
somos los
to
mismos, somos las
demonstrate that
mismas.
we
Han
are all the
podido, a partir
same,
del tambor de Falcón,
using the drums
Guárico
from
y el
Falcón,
Zulia del
Guárico,
sur
and
del lago,
Zulia, the
pudimos
south of the
recrear
lake. We
aquello
were
que ella quería
able
expresarnos sobre
to
la religiosidad,
replicate what she
esa
wanted to
espiritualidad
express regarding the
afro-yoruba.
spirituality
Ahora bien,
from
gracias maestra,
Africa
gracias por
and Yoruba
ir más allá de
beliefs.
los detalles
So
para
thank
ampliar el
you
saber
for
en
going
esa
beyond
unificación
those
de lo que
issues to
somos como
broaden
pueblos
our knowledge
africanos.
of what we are as Afro in our
María
region.
Fernanda Romero,
Lastly, we will
investigadora
give the floor to Maria
de Saberes
Fernanda
Africanos, Venezuela. Adelante.
Romero, researcher of the African Knowledge Institute.
Thank you and good afternoon. And I would like to begin by apologizing because my other colleagues, they stood up to make the presentation, but I'm a little bit nervous, and I feel much more comfortable if I remain seated. First, hello, good afternoon. Greetings to the sisterly nation of Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. And special greetings to the people from the Sucre state, because I am from the Sucre state. I am from the Sucre state. Very happy to be here with you. I would like to speak from my being, from who I am. I speak as you do. Go I go around in the cities. I know the streets. I speak from the daily activities of people, and this be from this daily experience of the peoples in the cities that I learn. Of course, I obtain knowledge from the books, no doubt, but I still give more weight to the daily life of people. So instead of spirituality and the Caribbean civilization, I'd like to start with the spirituality and then speak about the Caribbean character. When I started thinking about these two categories of spirituality and the Caribbean character, the spirituality, the spirit, and it comes to mind a friend from Mexico, Rosarin. He said once something that was very important. Without body, there are no ideas. Without body, there is no spirituality. And without spirituality, there is no body. I'm not questioning that the spirituality does not exist, or if it does exist. For me, it exists. However, this spirituality, the spirit manifests itself in the physical life through us. Therefore, our culture has taught us, and is totally against our reality. They have taught us that the Cartesian aspect, that we need to separate everything. In my case, I think this is a trinity. I'm a body, soul, and spirit, and mind. I am these three things. Therefore, I was reflecting upon this spirituality. To my understanding, is the spirituality is the possibility to be able to live, to go to the sublime. It is the quest for meaning to your life. Life meaning is the quest of the great thing, is the path you have to cover. And it honors our humanity. Therefore, the, if we separate this element, this goes against our humanity. Spirituality is part of habits, customs, rituals. Especially, rituals give sense to our lives, meaning to our lives. Both colonists as capitalists of today, for me, they are the oppressors. They always apply the same formula. So we need to debunk this. We need to attack this. What is this formula? They know that by destroying, by emptying, uh, emptying the spirituality of people, by attacking that spirituality, they use people So they serve the civilizational plan that they offer, the consumption capitalism. We don't live to live, we live for death. These are dead societies. So this is related with the an emptying of our spirituality, or the spirituality that could be harmful for capitalism. So there are three aspects when I talk about this idea that is related to slavery. This emptying, this emptying and this hollowing out has to do with capitalism. They want to empty our African roots. And it has to do a little bit with spoliation. Spoliation has three aspects. We have the economic and mineral spoliation, but we also have the spoliation of the body as such, because if you are dominated through the sword and the cross, the spoliation of our culture, of our, for instance, to take someone from Africa and to send this person elsewhere, that is part of the spoliation of the life of that person and the spoliation of the territoriality. A long time ago, I was thinking about this. This is very serious. This is indeed a tragedy. And this is the very same spoliation that is occurring in the case of Palestine. It is an example of struggle and resistance, and they will continue resisting up to the last Palestinian. And they are demonstrating, and long live Palestine, free Palestine. And we want them to allow Palestine be. But these spoliations I've mentioned, the purpose of this spoliation was to kill the spirituality of our African peoples in order to control them, so they become nothing, and they can be better being used of, to use them for production. And my ancestors were brought over here in this manner. My Afro forefathers, they came here through this violent slave trade. And the whole reason for this was economic. So the economic aspect is much more important than life. I remember this the beautiful movie, Cuban movie, La Última Cena, where the owner of the plantation says, we need to produce more sugar cane. And the administrator said, you know, we have not developed any technology. The only technology is to bring more Africans from Africa. That is why this justified the massive enslavement of Africans to come to Cuba to produce more sugar cane. That was the only technology available at that time. So they justified this slave trade because of the need of increasing the production of sugar cane. So through the plantation system and the sugarcane production, there are three realities in this context. We have first the Africans that have been forced to leave Africa. Second, the indigenous people, our original people, and The third aspect, in the case of the Spaniards, but also the Belgium, the French, the English, the Dutch, was the oppressors. In this confluence of cultures, we are going to see over time the creation of this Caribbean character that, of course, has indigenous contribution. We have the resistance of the Garifuna, the Arawaks, etc., which is an important ingredient. The contribution of the indigenous people together with the Afro-descendant of voodoo. Voodoo was key for the liberation of the Haitian people and the people Latin American as a whole. This confluence of elements is linked, is meshed, both for the original peoples and the African ones, subjected to a great violence. Despite the spoliation that I've mentioned, they were able to reinvent themselves, to recreate themselves, to rebuild themselves. And they transform the Caribbean in something similar to what they had in Africa, meaning they restore the being, the possibility of being was restored because they didn't have the right to be. However, the spirituality was the driving force for them to fight and to free themselves in the end. So in the Caribbean and Latin America, we see a huge variety of manifestations of manifestation. I'm not talking about religion as oppression. I'm talking about religion in the original sense, to share is the reality in us and comes from Yoruba, Bantu, and Voodoo traditions. The candomblé, for instance, la wanda, and in Venezuela, the cult to Maria Leonza, the Palo Monte, and other traditions. So, other than the spirituality, this, of course, we are talking about the spirituality of our original people, of the Afro-descended, the original ones who came to this region. I'm a Catholic, and sometimes people say, well, you know what these guys did, right? I know that, what the Catholics did. However, I still think that in the field of domination of uh, the Catholic Church and other religions, there is still a resistance, and the quest for truth and the resistance in favor of indigenous and Afro-descendant peoples and in favor of yourself, because we are Afro-descendant people. So we have a popular spirituality, which is not structured. What our sister said and showed in the pictures, those rituals that give meaning to your life. In a few days, we are going to commemorate the Saint John at the eve of Saint John, and then the festivities as such. And this is wonderful. We have the San Benito, Saint John, Saint Peter, And those are expressions. Some people say that this is pure art or artistic manifestation. No, no, this is very profound, very spiritual. I don't know why Pablo Sojo, someone wrote about it says que Christmas, a night Christmas, he talk about this Black Christmas. We are in this process of continuous liberation and learning. But then I went to the La Vega neighborhood to attend the festivities, and I understood this Black Christmas. It is the 23rd of June, on the eve of St. John's. At dawn, we spend the whole night, the whole wake ahead of the St. John, and we spend the whole night resisting. And with the first sun rays, we say, "Good day, John. Good day, John." And then I understood this is the Christmas, the Black Christmas. That is why, and I learned this through the practice, through the real life, and not from the books. So this is the spirituality I practice, the customs, the traditions, connecting me to my Afro ancestors and my indigenous ancestors as well. And it is very liberating, it's very diverse. A religiosity which is not diverse and whose purpose is not liberation is not spirituality. It's an empty spirituality, and we need to be very careful. We need to be very careful about this and be on the alert. I would like to say the following. Our sister, Monica Mancer, she has a beautiful project, Woman Drum. The drum, not as an artistic expression, but as an expression of our cultural values, which is very deep. The very existence of these traditions is a way of resistance. So I was thinking about a group from Colombia, La Perla, one of them, and Tambor Hembra. They play cumbia. And in the lyrics, they have a song which is called Holy Water. And when I see these videos, what I understand is that the spiritual expression goes beyond religiosity and rituals. And to conclude, I I agree with the ideas expressed by my predecessors. We need to constantly review our decolonial behavior, because we talk about decolonization. However, in our colleges, universities, the way the students are evaluated are challenging. So we need to review all this. We need to revert this. And it is in those very processes that we need to dismantle colonization. And regarding the secular aspect, we need to also be careful about that element. I have two proposals. First, that through the cultural ministry, we need to recover the Festival of the Drums of the World, because those were deep spiritual sensations, and even to see the Asian people playing the drums, that was very important. And another thing is that to invite all of you, to those from Venezuela and abroad, to register in our studies on Africa, our America, spirituality and religions in the Center of African, Latin American, Caribbean knowledge. And there we have these studies, and you can uh, register in those courses. And also, I've learned from a Cuban friend. It is something in the Bambara language. It's a song, a spiritual song in Bambara language. This is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria Fernanda, for the song. And when we immerse ourselves in our spiritualities every single day, they become a resistance tool. Someone was saying that our president had given himself to Christ, but let's not forget that we are in a lay and diverse country, and in that sea of secularity, we have space for our Afro spiritual expressions, which has been developed by our three panelists. So I think it is important to mention that we are a lay government state that allow us to have spiritual diversity. So thank you, masters, for your word. Remember, you can directly talk to them and ask them any questions if you have any doubts. We'll see you in 5 minutes to start the third conference regarding economy and cultural tourism. And with this, we will close today's conferences. Economy and cultural tourism. Thank you. The panelists will be Rosalind Paul, a cultural researcher and former Trade and Culture Minister, and Reinaldo Echeverria, researcher and director of the Folklore Ballet of Camagüey.
and Professor Diogenes, thank you very much. Let's sit down. Are you ready? Okay, our brothers and sisters are coming down. Good. The vassals of the Zulia state. So, economics and cultural tourism. After talking about the political aspect, we realize then that the spirituality is also linked to religious and politics go together, go hand in hand, and the spiritual character of our Caribbean region. Now we're going to address the economics and cultural tourism and how is this related to our territories. So we're going to listen to Rosalind Paul, for former Minister of Culture and Trade of Dominica and Culture of Dominica, of the Commonwealth of Dominica. She has the floor.
Muchas gracias. Y les deseo un gran día a ustedes, el pueblo de Dios. Cuando hablamos de turismo,
creative industries and tourism to the economy. The creative economy is $2 trillion in size, providing significant revenue for small businesses and employment, especially for women and youth. Creative industries account for 50 million jobs worldwide, according to the UN estimates. According to UNESCO 2022, the culture and creation sectors account for 3.1% of the global GDP and 5.2% employment. In the Caribbean, the creative industries are estimated to contribute an average of 5% of the regional GDP, employing 3% of the region's labor force. Although these figures do not account for the diverse levels of development in the region. So therefore, we have established that tourism and the creative industries are major. They are major industries that we can tap into for our own development in the region. And I speak of Latin America and the ALBA countries, the wider Caribbean region. And further, we do have a rich endowment of cultural heritage. And yesterday's experience spoke to that. It's testimony of that. Give ourselves a round of applause because we exhibited this rich heritage that we have, although diverse. So even when we spoke of one identity brought about by our drums, our African identity, you could see the diversity in our culture. And we can take advantage of these major industries through culture tourism. We have intangible cultural heritage, and we saw it on display yesterday. We have tangible or built heritage. We have a number of forts, historic sites, and just passing through here, you saw the Simon Bolivar house, ports, you name it. You go across Latin America and the Caribbean, and we do have a wealth of cultural assets. We do have a wealth of intangible cultural heritage, and we also have natural assets that are of cultural significance. There are a number of UNESCO World Heritage Sites, in fact, like the Mount Wapiton World Heritage Site in Dominica. So, have we fully taken advantage of this rich heritage that we have to promote cultural tourism as a major economic driver for development of our country? And as a Dominican, from a Dominican perspective, I would say not at all. And so what are we doing in Dominica? I will share our own initiatives in Dominica and what we expect the impact to be in terms of economic development. So we have a few initiatives that we're working on, and some already in existence. First, I will speak to the World Creole Music Festival in Dominica. I'm sure many of you may have heard of our World Creole Music Festival since 1997. And it brings about people, the Creole culture on display, and invites participating countries across the world, including Latin America and the Caribbean. So in that way, it also helps to advance the ALBA agenda in terms of our tourism culture program. When we have the World Creole Music Festival, it brings many people to Dominica. In fact, in 2019, it brought 7,335 visitors to our shows. So you imagine that all our hotels were filled, guest houses, apartments, people with homestays or houses they rented out, the restaurants, the food and local food and cuisine. People join into wearing the Creole outfits, so your seamstresses get to sew, they get to sell, your tailors get to sell, everybody, the transportation. So just imagine the economic impact of just one cultural tourism product called the World Creole Music Festival. Similarly, Carnival does the same for Dominica and other countries who celebrate Carnival. In Dominica, and we are currently constructing our international airport. And while it has not materialized, we expect that there will be economic benefits. Economic benefits for Dominica and the wider region. It will actually increase access to the country and bring many more visitors to our shores. It will allow us to be able to host major activities such as what is going on right here for cultural exchanges. It expects to boost businesses for many. If you have more visitors, you expect to have more enterprises, more business activities, more opportunities. And One thing I forgot to mention in terms of World Creole Music Festival, it brings that sense of national pride and patriotism. So at that time, Dominicans dress in Creole. At that time, they buy almost everything local to take away. So that is very important because first we need to appreciate what we have before we share it with others. So the airport, we expect to bring a great economic impact to Dominica as well. There's also a third initiative, which is the construction that was just launched, the construction of a marina and marina village. And again, it will bring, we expect to have bigger vessels dock. We expect to have more tourists coming into the country, more yachties. We will hopefully expand the scope of the Yachties Festival and embrace the cultural activities in this marina. The shops where we could sell the marina village, we will have the shops where you could vend your local art and craft, your local products, your cuisine, the local cuisine, the culinary arts, and hopefully we will have performers like the Pebush drummers that you experienced yesterday doing earning from the activities, presenting our culture, sharing it with others. And all of the other cultural groups, like the cultural group I lead of 40 years, all of these will be able to once again promote our culture, promote what is dear to us, promote our heritage while we gain from it. So I would want to take this opportunity to applaud the Pebush drummers for a wonderful performance yesterday. And this we will be sharing with the world through culture, tourism, development. Another initiative that we just started, and it speaks to people and community development, is the development of cultural enterprises targeting 3 districts and about 20 communities. And that includes our Kalinago community, our own indigenous people. The objective is to empower and build the capacity of these communities to take advantage of the rich cultural heritage that we have across all communities through community heritage tourism. We utilize the strategies of mapping the cultural assets, doing documentation, inventorying of the cultural heritage, sensitization, education and training for empowerment, the development of products and packages for tourism, building alliances and networking, doing the institutional strengthening, which means putting the proper system in place so that it can be a community-driven initiative where we establish and expand on the cultural enterprises that visitors or tourists can enjoy. We enjoy, but the visitors and tourists can also enjoy. And this may result in regenerative tourism, that people will come for the cultural experiences. We hope through this to create platforms for cultural enterprises, through cultural immersion activities, through the vending and sale of our own unique art and craft, promoting our local cuisine, having cultural exchanges, especially with the indigenous people, so we can hopefully have our own Kalinago people have exchanges with the Venezuelan indigenous people, the Suriname indigenous people, the Bolivian indigenous people, the Vinci indigenous people. And so these are a number of platforms that we will be launching so that you can have culture tourism thrive. These as well hopefully will advance the agenda of the ALBA tourism culture product. Through these, we hope, as I said, through cultural exchanges to share the knowledge on the ancestry of our Kalinago people and our own African. We will have a chance to showcase all year round what we have, our culture. In that way, if we bring more tourists to Dominica, we will also be bringing more tourists to the region. It will help ALBA in ensuring that there's development through training and education for the cultural and tourism industry. So these are some areas where it also advances ALBA tourism culture products so that the whole region can enjoy. Nonetheless, one of the key things that we will be doing, actually the impact in terms of the cultural enterprise development in the communities, one of the very important impact is if people are benefiting, if we can see the accrued benefits from cultural tourism, then you have the intrinsic motivation to safeguard your cultural assets. So people will take collective responsibility. There will be community ownership and buy-in in terms of safeguarding the cultural assets and heritage. Because while we seek to gain from these, our foremost and prioritized action is to ensure we preserve what is dear to us, which is our cultural heritage. So instilling in these people the benefits of protecting our culture and heritage. And while we are on that, I would want to speak to the fact that while we try to develop our country for cultural tourism, as I say, foremost of all, we need to safeguard our heritage. And I will end there by encouraging all of us to continue to safeguard what we have, to continue to safeguard our drumming and all our authentic cultural heritage. So let's continue to roll the drum as we roll into economic development. Roll the drums.
Thank you very much. Let's the drums speak. That a dream there at the airport is precisely a realization of these dreams, and one of the territories that we can visit. Dominica should be one of those spaces that we should visit with our drums. The idea for this this cultural exchange should be disseminated, spread in the region, so we can see and have the same events in Dominica. And the economic and cultural progress Dominica has had, and we would like very much to visit Dominica with our ALBA drums. We'll be very happy to be able to go to Dominica. Now we have Reinaldo Echemendia, researcher and director of the Folk Ballet of Camagüey from Cuba. Good afternoon. It is indeed a pleasure to be here, and we'd like to start by sending our warm greetings and affectuous hugs to the Venezuelan people, to ALBA, to the ALBA peoples,
who have organized this event. An event that is totally in tune with the drums. Also, I send greetings from Cuba. Cuba, who remained Cimarron, that is rebellious as usual, glamorous Cuba in the embrace to all its friends, and the Cuba that remains revolutionary, internationalist, and filled with solidarity. A Cuba that we want to. Today we want to remember the one who said that culture is the first thing we need to save. Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro said this. And in this sense, I would like to convey something to you. Culture as an indispensable concept for the development of the economy of tourism. In the 90s, Cuba went through a huge economic crisis after the drop of the fall of the Berlin Wall, and we had to resort to tourism in order to underpin our economy. So Cuba at the time was not a country like the other nations in the region with an infrastructure to foster tourism or the culture of welcoming foreigners. So we didn't have that culture. So because of the crisis, we need to focus on this industry, and thanks to it, we were able to achieve some level of development. And in 2019, Obama opened up to Cuba, but then, regrettably, immediately after, we had the nefarious consequences of the blockade, including the economy, including tourism, and including the most vital elements of our development. Now, regarding tourism, the first thing we did was to analyze tourism in order to understand what are the positive and the negative aspects of tourism. So we don't have a culture for tourism, but we rather see the fact that tourism should be adapted to our culture. So, for instance, the ALBA drums is not just a pure show. No. It goes to the root, to the popular culture, traditional culture. And it is what is beaten in our hearts. I'm here as a people. I am present. I am important and necessary and indispensable in order to understand that tourism, however we approach it, this tourism should be the essence of a people. It is not a Hollywood approach of the peoples. It is tourism should reflect the very soul of our people. I think we have a huge potential, and this potential is going to allow us, as our master said, to give us a unity of action within ALBA, which is the unity, which is reflecting the drums in its essence and connecting all of us as a monolith. A monolith to defend our identity in a globalized world. We need to have this sense of belonging to our identity, our integration, and our sense of inclusion, which are the main linkages connecting ALBA and other peoples who would like to join us in this endeavor. So we have a potential, and this potential was the result of the African diaspora. So now we are an African diaspora that goes to other corners of the world, and this allowed us to be understood, and many spaces, and we see the dispossessed, the poor people, they can't present themselves in these areas that were in the past for only for privileged peoples. So this is our approach. We need the economy of tourism. We need tourism to develop our nations, but we need to do it in a respectful manner. So through the historical heritage, we can show to the world, those who wishing to have our culture, our spaces, our essence, our celebrations, and the celebrations of Santiago de Cuba is also a space for the ALBA drums. The Oruro celebrations in Camagüey will always remain a space for the ALBA drums. And the Saint John in Camagüey, which is also commemorated between the 23rd and 24th of June, will always also be and a space ready to welcome you in order to celebrate in our plazas of Camagüey. Always welcome. Thank you very much. Sometimes we don't we see our ancestors. Our ancestors said that when there were no physical drums, we can't have a soul that is also a drum. So music can be produced without drums, but we can do it with thinking about the drum and the soul of the drum. So I want to tell you that the rhythm can be produced from anything. And we have a song of our major composer whose first protest song in the 60s, a poet, Silvio Rodriguez. Well, his work that went beyond our borders. The song is La era está pariendo un corazón.
Let's give another round of applause to our brothers, our Cuban brothers and sisters. No, we haven't finished. You can go sit down with the audience. You can go sit down with the audience, but we haven't finished. You are welcome to join the audience however you want. I was telling to the master that you should close today's conferences, but I reminded that I should continue promoting Venezuela, so we close our panel from Caracas, Venezuela with the following reflection. Please let's give another round of applause to our Cuban brothers because before such a long blockade during 60 years, they are an example for our region and they have seen how they can turn an obstacle into their potential. And the Cuban culture is present in our whole planet. And we are witnessing how they have used these strategies to overcome the difficulties, and Commander Fidel and Chavez are embracing themselves and seeing how we continue moving forward. So we must thank them for the orientation they always share with us. And when you were talking about the Fiesta del Fuego festival in Santiago, could also be a space for the drums. We could also have them in Cuba and in Dominica, as the former minister was saying. And well, here in Venezuela, thanks to the Bolivarian Revolution, we have had the inclusion and visibility of the drums, and we have paid the historical debt with our cultural experts and artists, going from our missions and great missions and quickly reviewing our Bolivarian Constitution. Article 91 is dedicated to the importance of culture, and we also have an organic law on culture, because culture before our revolution was only a complement, an accessory element, but today it is fundamental, and this meeting is an example of it. It is part in Article 3 of Organic Law of Culture, and this is the way in which we interpret the world, the way in which humans have relations amongst them, along with the production means of a community. But this is done in an open manner, that it isn't biased by class issues. And with this, we have paid a historical debt. And today, we have the Long Live Venezuela mission, with which we are embracing ourselves with the drums. And simultaneously we have Cojedes, Aragua and Carabobo states developing the great mission Long Live Venezuela. And I would like to read the main elements of the mission. Does any of you do not know what is a mission? Do you know what a mission is? Do we all know what a mission is in Venezuela? Okay. Do you know it? Yes? Okay. So within our mission we have 7 axes. Culture of Venezuela and movement. Register and participate with culture. This is the first time in which we have a census of artists and cultural experts, and we already have 600,000 people registered. Then produce for culture. And here we have a specific axis for economy. Let's remind ourselves that in Venezuela, the main backbone of its industry has been oil, but now we're trying to diversify our economy. And because of the 930 unilateral coercive measures, which has been the example of the blockade of the revolution. And this is why we are trying to go from oil, having an oil industry, to a diversified industry. So this is why here we talk about economy for cultural production. Venezuela has financed cultural experts, artists, creators, and this is a space to register yourselves. And those from San Juan can talk about the heritage expressions that come from the fervor of each of us, the cultural and tangible heritage of Saint Baptist is a contribution that will allow us to safeguard our heritage. Then we have education for culture. In this case, we can embrace our culture if we have a comprehensive education to go beyond what the US culture can impose as the hegemony, as our Master Casimira Monasterios is permanently expressing and emphasizing the importance of educating our population, so there's a real change in our Venezuelan population, so we can be a new men and women, as Che Guevara said. Then we have more infrastructure for culture, culture without borders, more heritage for culture, and then culture for constant communication to make culture viral. And here we have a great mission that gathers all the political policies that's directed to our artists and creators. Although we have national policies, each cultural expert, creator, and artist must work towards achieving sustainability. In our case, we have meditation sessions, and we give an energy to this mission, and we give it a name to to achieve these paths that will allow us to have sustainability. So how are we going to use this in order to sustain the economic and financial resources? So here we have a positioning, expansion, transcendence, and multidimensional perspectives, which are perspectives for the management of our group. In our Herencia group, we have asked ourselves, are we economic individuals? But how? Since the revolution started, we have been paid several debts, and one of them is the ones paid by our missions. This was the latest public policy dedicated to ourselves. But where are those indicators in our country? Because we are doing a lot of things simultaneously. If the etymology of economy establishes what the economy is, and then we can go to the origins of the word, which means the organization of your home. So if our economy is to organize your home, how are we organizing our home in Venezuela? So then we take this to the Experimental National University of Arts. I review the path we have gone through for vindicating all our artists and cultural experts. We are promoting the Venezuelan Observatory of Artistic Cultural Economies, or BECA. This is a project of the Experimental National University of Arts, UNEARTE, because in the Venezuelan case we can express this with forums, events, but we must go further, and we bring this topic to this panel with the promotion we are doing through the observatory to foster economic, cultural cultural economy, sorry, and I will refer to the observatory as OBECA. And as you have said, we do have a great diversity of drums, of joropo, of the different expressions from our country. We are a mega diverse and multidimensional country as its cultural heritage as well as a natural and intangible heritage. We have a vast diversity in terms of culture, and we, as agents that contribute to that, we have realized that this is not reflected onto the GDP, but with the new policies that are being executed and adjusted from the national government, we as a people's power and as members of these organized organizations, how are we going to evaluate our activities? How is this reflected in the GDP? Our master, Mrs. Rosalind, she showed the whole panorama with the UN and UNESCO percentages, and then arrived to Dominica, and she made painted the scenario of the cultural industry in her country. But in Venezuela, we don't have those indicators, and we have to build them. So the question is, what are the cultural indicators for Venezuela? And we hope that in our next event with ALBA, we can give you some clues regarding those indicators. And in the other parts of the country, we have the great mission Long Live Venezuela. So this is a value chain in the cultural sector with creation, production, trading, and consumption. And in the terms of promotion in that value chain, we are very clear about the promotion and the promotion activities, and that's why we are fostering this meeting in which we will embrace our culture and have exchanges. And that's why the ALBA drums responds to this. This is the horizon of 2030 agenda of ALBA, and here we have responses to what we are proposing ourselves as the region of ALBA. However, we must ask ourselves how many of us are available and what are our achievements in this path, because we are not only presenting and expressing ourselves, but it is also part of a history that should be visible in order to evaluate how we're contributing from Venezuela, the artists and cultural experts, to the GDP. So that's why from the Venezuelan Observatory of Cultural Economies, along with the Ministry of the People's Power for Culture, that's the second axis of the mission. And that's why, although we have 930 unilateral coercive measures, we are able to see at Venezuela that there are other production means beyond oil, and we have made visible this diversification, and in this case it is a turn of arts and culture. But what are our indicators? And here we have a proposal for the brothers and sisters of ALBA in the OBECA, because this observatory is at the disposal of ALBA. And where is the satellite account at a regional level? Because when we see the European Union, they usually talk as a bloc. Each country has their own diversity, and they have different levels of potential in different sectors. And I'm about to finish here, but how are we from ALBA as a movement are being seen? Do we have a common satellite account in this case? In the 2030 horizon of ALBA, we're, for example, talking about Sucre, which is the regional currency, and this is an ongoing process. But if we get together, join our cultural economies in each country, we can create a bloc for the region. So this could be an economic cultural proposal to which we can contribute. You from Dominica, you from Cuba, and from Venezuela join our artistic cultural economies with regional indicators the way we are promoting it in ALBA. So why here we have the opportunity of building a satellite account for ALBA. We have different indicators in other regions in the world, like the European Union. So we must create our own indicators from Venezuela, from ALBA. Domestically, we are working with this observatory, and then at a regional level, we can join our cultural economies to showcase that we are a superpower in terms of music, and then how this will be translated into the GDP, like the indicators showed by our master from Dominica at the beginning. So this is ALBA cultural economy, and let's continue growing together because we are a single people, and the Venezuelan Observatory of Economic, Cultural, Artistic Observatory is at the disposal of ALBA. Now let's go have lunch. Let's build, contribute, and I will see you at the Bolivar Square. We will continue tomorrow, and then on Sunday we will have other conferences in this room. Thank you very much.